To a primetime news follow-up now. There's been much talk about the increase in bank fees, and despite public outrage, the banks appear to be going ahead with their plans. Now, this will see customers being charged for a number of services. But how can we lessen the impact on our pockets? Denzel Williams is the professor of international business at the University of the West Indies and now joins us live via Zoom. Dr. Williams, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening, Herman, and good evening to your listeners as well.
Good. All right, bank fees, that's nothing new, but certainly the expansion of the categories of service which will now incur fees is a problem. The banks say they had no choice, but from where you sit, Dr. Williams, is there another way?
Well, what I would say, I'll make a quick comment on that, is that generally, when we're discussing bank fees, it really needs to be discussed in the broader context of the costs of doing banking. And so, as you would appreciate, Herman, that the cost of doing banking is extremely exorbitant. There are a lot of costs that you have to face for regulation, compliance, even the whole issue of using your ATM, for example. You have to talk about infrastructure costs. You have to talk about paying deposit insurance. All of these costs are huge costs. But importantly, what you would have recognized is that even within the context of banking, a lot of our banks, although they may appear to be making big profits, they are way below industry standard. If you take, for example, our largest bank, NCB, they would have made $13 billion last year in terms of profit. That is just 1.8% in terms of return on asset. That is way below industry standards. So the general point is that while we say, okay, fees have been increasing, the truth is that there is no, the fee increase, while it may understood in the broader context of the higher cost of living, we also have to look at it in the broad context of how under the operational cost of banking. And so when we talk about another way, what we now have to do is that we have to mine our data to look at the various categories of customers and see how best we can protect the most vulnerable as the banks increase these fees. And I think that's the direction that we have to go.
All right, you speak about protecting the most vulnerable, and there's a recent push to target the unbanked. How do you see this now influencing or stopping them even, the unbanked segment of the population?
Well, that's what I'm asking for, that what we have to do is to do the necessary analysis and say, okay, if we look at the class of persons who are in the unbanked population and say, what would be the average usage for example, your ATM machine, the banking services that require fees, etc. And we make packages. So we give them a package and say, for example, the first 10 transactions that you do will be free. And after that, you will actually incur a cost, etc. If we start looking at the data like that, we're in a much better position to attract a type of customers, because you'll be surprised to see that a lot of persons in the unbanked population, if we were to give them a package like that to say maybe for the first 10 or the first 5 or so transactions will be free, that would still motivate them to do banking. While at the same time, what you're seeing is that the banks still have to recover their cost of doing business. So they have to look at other areas where they can actually charge the fees. Because as I said before, let us not assume that an increase in bank fee is all going to the bottom line of the bank. A lot of the fees actually have to do with the cost of operating and doing business, and the cost of doing business is actually increasing. When you look at banks having to pay asset tax, they have to pay all these regulatory fees, they have to deposit a portion of their deposit to the Bank of Jamaica that earns no interest. They have to put money in these ATM machines that earn no interest at all. There's a huge cost for doing business, and they have to find a way to also offset that cost.
Okay, well, despite the justification, most customers are still trying to find a way to avoid these fees. What tips can you give as to how we can bypass or lessen the impact of the fees on our pockets?
Well, the first thing that I would suggest, customers need to actually plan their banking. So, as you know, some of the banks would actually offer you a package to say maybe the first 5 or so transactions would be free. If you are, planning your banking, you know that you need a certain amount of money per month, then you actually may have to go and make that withdrawal, so you don't have to be incurring the charges every time that you go to the bank. You also need to look at where you're using your kind of services that you're actually using from the bank. You can bulk those services together so that you can take the maximum benefits from these. So in essence, you have to shop around and see exactly where the package deals are, and then you take the most or make the most of those package deals.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor
But one of the
Denzel
things that I
Williams.
would say, Herman, as you close off, though, because I've listened to the debate on the issue of banking fees, and we have come a very far way since 1996. to build a very robust banking sector. And one of the things that we need to be very careful of is that we don't make very reckless statements to reverse the gains in that sector. So categorizing the banking sector as a cartel, etc., is not the real best use of a description at all to describe the hard-won gains that we have made in our financial system over the last, I would say, 2 decades or so. And that's very, very important that we don't try to reverse those gains at all.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Denzel Williams, Professor of International
Welcome.
Business at the University of the West Indies.